All right, good evening, everybody. Happy Monday. Here we are once again. Welcome to Slay Security Plus, January 15th, 2024, SY0-701, domain 1.4. We are continuing the journey through cryptography. Cryptography is something that I actually enjoy quite a bit. There's a lot of little stuff that goes into it, a lot of stuff to remember, but had to take a whole course on it for school, and actually it was something that kind of clicked for me. So I'm looking forward to sharing the knowledge that I have and imparting the knowledge upon you. And then, of course, anything you can teach me, feel free to drop it in chat. I see a few of y'all are out there. Please say hello and know who you are, and we'll get rocking and rolling here. All right, so we'll start with the Slay Security Plus values. We're all inclusive here, 0 to hero. Everybody is welcome. All the content is freely available on my channel, as well as the Security Plus or Slay Security Plus channel here on YouTube, as well as on stream on Thursdays and Mondays on Twitch. No BS in this. Everything we have, both Jesse and I are in the industry. We've tested this. We've taken the test, we've done the exams, and we know that what we are teaching is effective. And everything that you learn is actionable. You will be able to apply this down the road. And then we as a group are the community. It is not me, it's not Jesse, it's not me and Jesse. It is everybody that is part of Slay Security Plus, part of the Slay fam. So happy to have y'all here with me, and happy to teach y'all what I know so you can succeed with your Security Plus 701 exam. So when you are setting up for the exam, commit to a date. It is probably one of the biggest things that helped motivate me to getting my exams, getting my certifications. Set a goal. And whether that is a month out, whether it's 3 months out, whether it's 6 months out, set that date and use that date to hold yourself accountable. That way you're not just talking about it. That way you're not just, saying, well, I'm going to have it by this point. Well, if you don't actually pony up the money and make sure that you are set up for success by that particular date, you're not going to hold yourself accountable. I can definitely attest to that. But as soon as I start scheduling those exams, it holds me to it, and it puts me under the gun to make sure that I study and I know everything in that timeline that I set for myself. And then set yourself a pathway to slay. So building out a timeline, not overstressing yourself, and making sure that you are able to accomplish the goals that you want to, and also leaving time for the important stuff, your family, work, everything that is outside of cybersecurity, if it is not your career currently. So happy Monday, Bitsdance from me. Welcome to the party. And so keys to success on the exam, practice exams, whether it is the Cybex exams, which I definitely enjoy. Professor Messer, kind of pick your poison amongst the exams, but document your results. My trick is flashcards. When there are questions that I miss, I go back and I review them, and I make flashcards associated with those exam questions. And then I drill those flashcards before my next practice exam. And that helps me understand and remember what I got wrong, but why I got it wrong. Also going back and reviewing those topics that I missed. Most of your practice exams will tell you what section that particular question is from, so you can go back and target your reading and dig a little deeper into that particular topic. And then continued quizzing and reviewing, flashcards, more practice exams, mini quizzes. Some of the practice exams, you can actually build out smaller quizzes. And then once you're scoring that 95% range, it is time to rock and roll. I'd even say if you're in the upper 80s, you're probably pretty darn close if you do a pretty good review right before the exam. So those are the tips for success. And we'll get rocking and rolling here. So we're actually not going to be covering 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. It'll be 1.4 tonight. This is me, Taylor McDonald, the Cyber Hamburglar. And this is Security Plus 701, Domain 1, Objective 1.4. So 1.4 is explain the importance of using appropriate cryptographic functions. So cryptography is a monster of a topic. This is probably something that we're going to carry on into Thursday as well, because there's just so much to cover in this domain, and a lot of little stuff that you unfortunately have to memorize for the exam. So go back here, encryption fundamentals. So I'm going to go kind of break down a little bit of what Jesse covered on Thursday. I did include a QR code right here in the corner for Jesse's stream from Thursday, so you can go back and watch that and kind of get some of these topics he goes a little bit further in depth on, but I'm going to run back through kind of what cryptography is, where it came from, and then kind of the key points that are going to build on tonight's lesson. So cryptography actually predates the modern computer age. It was originally used back in the time of Caesar. One of the first ones that we know of, the Caesar cipher, essentially rotating letters in the alphabet, remapping it to obfuscate what the message actually says. And then you get into things like the Viennese cipher, which is essentially combines a little bit of math, just more. Letter A is moved 3 places, letter B is moved 2 places, and you use that remapping of the alphabet in order to deliver a message without somebody being able to clearly read it. And then getting into modern ciphers and techniques, the Enigma machine from World War II, that's probably one of the most famous ones, and steganography, hiding messages within other media, so hiding it in MP3 files, hiding it in JPEG images, simply changing small portions of those images to hide a code or hide information in it, is what steganography is. We get into public key infrastructure, getting into the crypto systems, your symmetric crypto systems. It's a shared key available to all users. Symmetric cryptography is very fast. And on the obverse, you have asymmetric crypto systems, which are a combination of public and private keys for each user within that particular system. So whether it's your local network or whether it's a public network, each user has a public and private key in order to access the systems that they need. It is a lot slower, which is when you start to see things combined like Diffie-Hellman, which allows you to use asymmetric cryptography to transmit a symmetric or a shared key between 2 users. So you start off with a slow cryptographic system, but it's very secure because only one person has each of the private keys, and each person has the other person's public key, but sharing a key that nobody else knows through that cryptography to encrypt other data. So it takes something very slow, that initial handshake, so to speak, and then makes it very fast once the data is being transmitted, or once it's being sent across, it can be decrypted very, very quickly. So you'll see asymmetric typically is that first handshake, and then it switches over to streaming encryption. There's streaming encryption algorithms, which will typically be your symmetric algorithms. And then key escrow was another thing that Jesse touched on. Essentially, it is somebody else holding your decryption keys. So your private keys are in the hands of a third party. So if you're working on a project and you leave the company and you're the only person that has those private keys, nobody's going to be able to access it. But if there's a copy of those private keys or your private key in a vault or held by a third party, that data is still going to be able to be decrypted. So you see it often in cloud environments as well, where you may have a SaaS application, a software as a service application, where your private keys are not held by you, and they're not held by the owner of that SaaS application, that cloud provider, but you actually have a third party that you escrow that with. So in the event that, say, that SaaS application goes under, all of that data, you can still get access to it because you have that key that is able to decrypt that data and gives you that access to not be locked in and not potentially lose all that information. So as you start to get into cloud, you will see escrow as something that is very prevalent in that environment. So encryption, most important to the C and the I of the CIA triad. So your confidentiality and integrity. So encryption, being able to encrypt an entire drive, protecting the privacy of the data, making sure that not just everybody can read it. And then integrity, being able to use hashing to be able to verify that data has not been tampered or modified. And then also using it for non-repudiation. So being able to get the assurance that whoever sent a message to you or whoever sent the original message, it actually originated from that sender and not somebody pretending to be that sender. And then we've got the different types of encryption. So you have encryption for data at rest, which is your data stored on any storage volume. So whether it's tapes, whether it is flash drives, it is cloud storage, it is stored data resting on a volume somewhere. So you have different types of that data at rest. So you've got different types of encryption for it. So you've got full disk encryption, which is encrypting the entire disk itself. You have partition encryption, which you encrypt a partition of that hard drive. So if you have a hard drive that's segmented into 3 or 4 partitions, you can encrypt just a particular partition. You can get it all the way down to file level encryption, or you can encrypt volumes within a full disk. So if you had a tree of folders, you can actually encrypt that entire tree. So anything that's within it is encrypted, but anything outside of that tree of folders is unencrypted. And then database encryption. Databases are also data at rest. So you can encrypt either the entire database or you can do record level. So encrypting just a particular column or a set of fields within a database would be your database, your record level encryption. Data in transit is your data being transported. So it's data that's being sent or being communicated. And then data in use is data that is stored in the active memory of a computer. So data that is in active use, making sure that that data is secure and encrypted. So essentially making sure that the data that is sent into memory has some sort of encryption on it. So when it is pulled out of memory, say by another application that's able to sniff that area of the memory, that it is actually encrypted and they cannot read that portion of the data, that it doesn't make any sense to the application that is not authorized to actually use it. And then another fundamental of encryption is Kirchhoff's principle. So this has to do with the algorithms and the ciphers that you use when creating an encryption algorithm. The design of the system should not require secrecy. So essentially how the system is built, everything is open to whoever wants to see it. So, I mean, showing how the sausage is made. So if you know how the sausage is made, you should still not be able to compromise that encryption. The secret is actually the key that is put into it. So even though you have all the information on how this is supposed to work, unless you actually have the secrets on both ends, so if it is asymmetric, having the public and private keys, or if you have the shared key, the symmetric key, you cannot break that system. Like, you're not able just to compromise that system right off the bat. And then compromise should not inconvenience the users. So essentially, if that particular encryption system is broken, if somebody were to break into it and be able to compromise it, it should not require the users to go back and have to undo everything that was done. There should be a way for forward secrecy, which essentially anything encrypted after that break or that compromise, anything encrypted after that is not affected. So you have this essentially idea that anything going forward is still secret, but everything prior to that is not able to be unencrypted by the same key that you were able to break into it at that point. So essentially it's kind of like having a rolling key for a garage door, having a rolling code. It's constantly changing, it's constantly moving, so it's able to keep that security level going forward. So basics on cryptography: confidentiality and privacy, essentially protecting the data. Integrity is your hashing and message digests. Authenticity and non-repudiation are your digital signatures and digital certificates. And then we get into ciphers, which essentially are the algorithms used to perform your encryption and decryption. You have block ciphers, which work on chunks of data or blocks of data, or blocks or chunks of a message. And then you have stream ciphers that work on one character at a time, moving through one character or one bit of a message at a time, moving through that message and encrypting it one at a time. So it is a very slow process when you get to stream ciphers, because you're having to go one single bit at a time as opposed to doing entire chunks of data at once. So kind of rehashing here, no pun intended. Encryption uses, you can use it for obfuscation, so essentially making it harder to read data, or making it less obvious what the data actually is. Steganography, essentially hiding data within other media, so hiding it within images, audio files, burying it wherever you can, but somebody else knowing how to be able to access that particular hidden data. And then tokenization, being able to create essentially representation for one value. So if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, but your token for it could be ZYXC, and so you just have a representation of that original value is a token. The ZYXC is your tokenization. Data masking essentially is hiding the data. You can use it for hashing, which essentially gives you a mathematical representation, essentially a breakout of the current state of that file. If any changes are made to the file, the hash is going to come out completely different. So it tells you if that file has been modified, the hash is going to stay the hash is going to change, but if it has not been modified, it will stay. It'll stay as it originally was. Salting is essentially when you encrypt something, you can put in an extra value to change the mathematical function of the cipher. So you can add in an extra layer of security. So if you took, say, just the word cow, and you made a MD5 or a SHA-256 hash of it, and use that as your salt before you put it into a algorithm for encryption, or even just into a hash algorithm to create a hash for a password, that salt that you created the hash of, and then you use that hash as your salt for your next hash, is going to make it far more difficult to break the second hash. And there are certain hash algorithms that'll do this 1,000 times before creating the final hash. So it is just over and over again, just mashed up tons of different variations of these hashes going all the way through. So knowing what that original word is, you got to be able to backtrack how many times it was done and what the original did to get back to that original data, and knowing that exact hash algorithm, how it got there. Again, you can't undo a hash, but you'd have to be able to go back through and essentially find what each of the hashes was based off of a rainbow table in order to go back through and undo the hashing in to get to the salt and all the way through. So you can use hashing and salting in conjunction with each other for security. Yes, eggs and hash. I love corned beef and hash. That is my jam. Encryption is also used for certificates and digital signatures. So digital signatures, you are essentially signing a message. So you'll take a copy of your message, you'll create a hash of that message, and then when you make that hash of it, you encrypt that hash with your private key. And then when you send it off, the recipient can take your public key and actually decrypt it, view the hash, and then compare your message, the hash of your message, to that hash that you sent over to verify that it has never been modified or was not modified in transit. Certificates, those essentially are used to, I'll actually get into that here in a minute, so I'll leave that one aside for the moment. Key stretching can be very similar to salting and hashing. You're essentially taking your base key and using a mathematical function or using a function in order to make that key longer, so it is harder to essentially break the encryption of your particular cipher. So you can use a salt within that, a salt and the hash, you can combine them together and make a longer key that you use in your encryption algorithm to make it harder for somebody to be able to get into the into that data flow and see what's happening. Encryption is also used in blockchain. You hear a lot about it with Bitcoin, but essentially it creates a immutable ledger. And essentially every transaction that is done is not able to be changed once it actually happens. Once it has been validated and verified, it is there and it's there to stay. So you'll start seeing companies here in the coming years, and even some now, they're using essentially these open ledgers that everybody can be a part of. They can see what's going on, and they can see any changes that are made to this particular blockchain, and able to actually review every single change. But because it's public, everybody knows it's trusted because everything is out there. And if something's changed, it doesn't add up at the end. It is something that will probably take more time for me to explain than I have tonight, but definitely something that I'd love to have a conversation with in the future. If you really want to dig in deep, there's a podcast called Security, Cryptography, Whatever, and it is absolutely hysterical because they do get quite off topic, but they talk a lot about public ledgers. They talk about blockchain, and essentially post-quantum cryptography, really digging into everything cryptography in the current state of things. A lot of it goes way over your head until you get about 4 or 5 episodes under your belt, but it is absolutely entertaining to listen to, and really kind of gets you thinking about kind of where things are going down the road. So this is probably one of my favorite sheets that I got out of the Western Governors University Discord channel. This is for my encryption course. This essentially is my cheat sheet on how I passed my encryption class. So the biggest part is each one of these are kind of broken up by the mnemonics here. So your yellow ones are your stream ciphers. So Ray and Cindy. So RC stands for 4 hours. So RC4, doing the cha-cha on stream. So Ray and Cindy dance 4 hours doing the cha-cha on stream. So you have RC4, cha-cha are your stream ciphers. Asymmetric antlers on a D deer. These are all of your asymmetric algorithms. RSA, Diffie-Hellman, El-Gamal, elliptic curve, DSA. Oh, I can go back here. Those are all of your asymmetric algorithms. The other way to kind of remember these as well is, for the most part, with the exception of elliptic curve, they are people's names. So these people were very proud of what they made. So Diffie-Hellman, El-Gamal, I can't remember the names on RSA, but I know it's, I can't remember off the top of my head, But RSA and DSA were also acronym, or essentially an abbreviation of 3 names. So those are going to be your asymmetric ciphers. Everything else are symmetric block ciphers. So Blowfish, DES, RC2, Skipjack, they're all your block ciphers, with the exception of these ones, which we don't need to know for Security Plus, Mickey, Trivium, Rabbit. Those ones, they're not super prevalent yet. They're primarily used in IoT devices and smaller, essentially devices with smaller processing power. So they're very lightweight stream ciphers for streaming data, streaming video, things like that. You may need to know your cipher block modes. These are primarily going to be what's used. You see it mostly associated with DES and triple DES. You have your electronic code book, your cipher block chaining. So to break these down, you have electronic code book, which was the first variation of DES. You use the same key for each block, means that it has the same output for the same plain text. So the word fish comes out as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and if you run across fish again in the same series of words, it's going to come out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the electronic code book. So the security is pretty low because you'll be able to find repeating patterns of words and letters, so it makes it easier to crack. The cipher block chaining adds an initialization vector that's kind of like the salt for your salt for a hashing algorithm. Your IV, your initialization vector, is kind of like that salt. It adds some variation to it, but it uses the results of previous block inputs to process the current block. So it pretty much, if you know what one block says, you can figure out the rest of them based upon that. Cipher feedback, output feedback, and CTR, counter mode, all act like stream ciphers. So essentially it takes your current block and it does an XOR, which, yeah, you probably don't necessarily need to know that for the exam, what an XOR is or how it works. But essentially it is binary math. It does a binary math process of the previous block, takes that and then uses that to encrypt the next block. So, and it moves on and on and on down the line. And then output feedback, kind of similar idea. And then the CTR mode generates a counter value and a nonce. Nonce is like another value based on previous blocks in order to calculate the value for the next block that's going to be encrypted. So I will share this in the SLA Security Plus Discord. This is definitely helpful, at least these 3 here. Definitely want to know these for the for the Security Plus exam. Camilla's 128-year-old cat. That's all your 128-bit block ciphers. So Camilla, AES, and Twofish are your CAT. Everything else is 64-bit blocks. You may or may not see questions about block sizes on the exam. It wouldn't surprise me. You may have 1 or 2, but it's not something that I would stress too much about, but just learn these 3 mnemonics. You should be good to go. So public keys, private keys, and key escrow. So symmetric keys use the same key for decryption and encryption. It is faster, but if the key's lost, protection's lost. It also requires a ridiculous number of keys. So essentially it is the number of people that need a key. So if you have 10 people times the number of people minus 1, so 9. So you need 90 divided by 2. So you would need 45 individual keys for 10 people to communicate. So it becomes ridiculous when you start doing the math on it and you have 1,000 people, you wind up with 10,000 keys, 100,000 keys before you know it, which is where you get into asymmetric, where each person has a public and a private key, and reduces it down to 2 keys per person, as opposed to, you know, for you to contact the other people in your group, you've got to have a key to share with each individual person. So person 1 out of 10 has to have their key, or they have to have a key for each of the 9 other people, and so on and so forth down the line. So each person has 9 keys to communicate with the 9 other people. Your symmetric algorithms, you're going to look at AES, DES, RCA, two-fish, and blowfish. Main ones to know for the exam would be AES and triple DES, so 3DES. And then your key escrow is essentially your storage of your key. You can actually purchase appliances, even cloud appliances, that will escrow your keys for you in a hardware security module. It essentially operates like a service that you can have your keys stored in your HSM, and that only the authorized people can access them. And so if somebody leaves your company, you can still get into it if you have essentially an administrator account to get in and get that key. But a lot of the time, if you go and you pull that key out, it's probably going to destroy it at that point. But it gives you that option to be able to recover encrypted data. Starting to see it more and more that HSMs are being used as key escrows, but often it is a third party that is going to be handling key escrows. But hardware security modules essentially are a lockbox for all of your keys. They can't be tampered with. There are different levels of security for those boxes, ranging from essentially tamper evident seals are the basic part, getting all the way up to acid vials that if the seal is broken on it and it's opened up, it cracks a vial over the encryption chip and it destroys the chip. So the level of security varies greatly, as well as the cost. They can get very, very expensive when you get into some of the higher level of security on your HSMs. But they should be completely tamper resistant. You're not able to go in, modify them, whether they're on or off. You can't read data out of them, anything like that. But they handle user authentication. They handle, essentially all of that authentication, and offload it from the servers, being able to allow essentially another device to handle that processing, so your server's not doing it, as well as handling all of the normal day-to-day stuff that server is intended to do. You can use them for signing certificates, which we'll get into in just a moment, and then you can use it for your public key interface. So asymmetric encryption, users have their own public-private key pair. So essentially you have a key that you keep secret, and then you have a key that you can give out. And when you have that public-facing key, somebody can take that key, encrypt whatever message with your public key, and send you that information. Then you can decrypt it with your private key. But the important thing to know is that if you have a public key and you encrypt data with it, you cannot unencrypt that data with the public key. So it is a mathematical function that is only reversible by the other half of the key, which is the private key. So you have to have both pieces to be able to unencrypt the data. So one key used to encrypt, the other to decrypt. And one key cannot be used to both encrypt and decrypt. So used for confidential or private communication, digital signatures, and then also the symmetric key exchange, so Diffie-Hellman. One of the best ways that it was explained was essentially you have 2 individuals. They choose common color, and so they choose one color to share. They each choose a secret color. When you mix the colors together, that is the color you get for each. So you get this kind of, I don't know, what do you want to call that? Taupe and green. And then you can exchange the mixed colors and then add it back to your secret color. and then you get the shared secret. So it ends up at this brown as you continue mixing the colors. But because you've combined your common color and your secret color, and then shared the combination of those secrets, and then paired them back again with your secret color, that gives you a shared secret. Because you now each have essentially opposite sides, but mathematically everything adds up back to the same number once you get it down to that final block. Essentially, it's normally using very large prime numbers, things that are not easy to calculate just on a sheet of paper in front of you. So it's pretty in the weeds when you dig down into it, but pretty much off the bat, I mean, this is essentially how Diffie-Hellman works to create a shared secret. And then kind of back to the asymmetric encryption. So for confidentiality, the sender encrypts with the recipient's public key, and then the recipient decrypts with their private key. And then for digital signatures, the sender encrypts with the sender's private key, and then the recipient can decrypt it with the sender's public key. So essentially being able to provide that non-repudiation. When you encrypt with the signature with your private key, that shows that it came from you and only you, because only your public key can decrypt it. So digital certificates essentially provide a secure means to provide a third party, an unknown third party, with a trusted copy of an organization, individual, or device's public key. Essentially, anybody can go out there and create their own certificate. You can have your own self-signed certificates, but it doesn't do anything to show that you are, in fact, who you say you are. So, like I pulled this one for bestbuy.com, and the issuing organization, the certificate authority, is Bitdefender. So Bitdefender Personal Certificate Authority, they issued this certificate to Best Buy, and because they are a trusted certificate authority, they have used their private key to digitally sign their certificate that is issued to Best Buy to say that this is in fact a trusted website. And you can verify that certificate by decrypting it with the certificate authority, so Bitdefender's public key. And that essentially allows that security level that, you know, they've gone to a point of validating that Best Buy is who they say they are, and the websites that hold this particular certificate are in fact Best Buy. It essentially just gives you that level of security and assurance that the person that you're communicating with is in fact who they are, because a trusted third party has actually validated that. Certificates can get breached. There's been a number of breaches over the years, some major certificate authorities that have been breached. And when that happens, those certificates in that particular certificate authority have to be revoked. They are no longer valid because anybody can take that particular certificate and use that certificate on their website. They can use that subject's certificate and pretend to be them. So those certificates get put on a certificate revocation list, which you can still access, but it is a very slow process being able to get a response to check and see if that certificate has been revoked. So there is the online certificate status protocol, which essentially is real-time certificate verification. You can essentially, your computer will go out and check with the OCSP and ping out to that protocol with the certificate information, say, is this a valid certificate? Okay, good, and send it back. So that gives your computer that assurance when you actually get a certificate that it is currently valid and it hasn't been revoked, and that it's still trusted. And then you can self-sign certificates, like I said earlier. It's best for internal use. You normally have an internal certificate authority. You have a server on site, typically a set of servers, normally one primary certificate authority, and then you have secondary authorities that are allowed to issue certificates, but all the primary certificates are held within that primary certificate authority that is not attached to the network. It is not used in production to maintain that secrecy for the primary certificates for the organization. But you don't typically see them used publicly. You can create your own for your own house if you wanted to, but it's probably not going to do you much good. It's just more headache to have to keep updating them when they expire. So different certificate formats and types. So the primary certificate that you're going to see is the SY0-701 that is used for digital certificates. Essentially, it's an international standard that lays out how digital certificates are formatted. So they have uniform ways of being read. But that being said, they can be saved in different storage formats. So you have 4 primary storage formats that you have to know for the exam. It is distinguished encoding rules, so DER. It's a very common binary format, and it's able to be identified by the .DER, .CRT, or .CER extensions. But that being said, the one below it, PEM, the Privacy Enhanced Mail, is an ASCII text version of DER. So it's ASCII on PEM, it is binary on DER, but PEM also uses the .CRT. So until you inspect that file, you can't tell whether it is DER or PEM. But you'll see these used in pretty much every operating system. You can see them on Windows, you can see them in Linux, but Windows does have some that it prefers to use, or its preferred usage with Windows, which is PFX, the Personal Information Exchange. It is a binary format and can be identified by the .pfx or .p12 extensions. And then P7B, which is also used by Windows, and that one is ASCII with the P7B. So those are your storage formats. And then the types of certificates, you have domain validation. Essentially, the CA is verifying that the certificate subject controls the domain name. So, hey, my name's Taylor, and I own xyz.com. That is essentially all that they're doing. So it's a very weak form of validation. So anybody can go out and just say, yes, I own this, and get a certificate for that domain. Organization validation. Essentially, they go deep enough to find the name or verify the name of the business that's purchasing their certificate, in addition to owning that domain. So being able to verify that that particular organization in fact owns that domain and they are a legitimate business. And then extended validation, the certificate authority does additional checks, to the point of sending somebody physically in the office of that organization to verify that they are who they say they are and that they are a legitimate business, and before giving them that particular certificate, that SY0-701 digital certificate. So those you do need to know for the exam as well. Just the different levels. Really, if you remember, that domain is your lowest form, and then extended is the highest. So it's extended beyond would be the way that I would remember it. And just that extended is the highest level of validation for the certificate types. And that'll pretty much get you through the exam, just if you're able to identify those just as weakest to strongest. So that is it for tonight. As far as my PowerPoint here goes, I do have some questions prepared, and we will do a lightning round on them. As we were getting I was a little long in the tooth with my presentation. There's just a lot of content when it comes down to cryptography. There's a ton to do. So go ahead and start our session here. Oh, there we go. All right, and so anybody that wants to join in and participate with the quiz here this evening, you can join in on vvox.app at 136-088-873 is the ID. Once you get to vvox.app, you can punch that in or scan the QR code. All right, so we'll go ahead and start the first question here. Looks like we got a couple of y'all participating so far. So which of the following statements about cryptographic keys is incorrect? All cryptographic keys should be kept secret. Longer keys are better than shorter keys when the same algorithm is used. Asymmetric algorithms generally use longer keys than symmetric algorithms. Digital certificates are designed to share public keys. So which of the statements is incorrect? So I'll give y'all a couple moments here to answer. So when I start reading a question like this, when it's which one is incorrect, I think about it in the obverse and which of these are correct? Longer keys are better than shorter keys when the same algorithm is used. Okay, so if I have a longer key, it should make it more secure in the same algorithm. So I would lean towards that one being correct. As far as being a correct statement, not the correct answer. Asymmetric algorithms generally use longer keys than symmetric algorithms. Seems valid to me. I mean, if you figure that symmetric algorithms use one key, asymmetric algorithms use two. So 2's bigger than 1. So that would make me think that, yeah, that one would be correct. It'd be a correct statement. Digital certificates are designed to share public keys. And we just covered that. I mean, digital certificates share public keys. So the answer here is A. All cryptographic keys should be kept secret. All right, 50% on that one. And I don't expect y'all to get every one of these correct. Cryptography is something that is probably going to be a sticking point for just about everybody on the exam. So don't feel bad you don't get it tonight, but it's something definitely to read about more and quiz on as much as possible as you prepare for the exam. So company Acme Widgets has 10 employees that they all need the ability to communicate with one another using a symmetric encryption system. The system should allow any 2 employees to securely communicate without other employees eavesdropping. If Acme Widgets switch to an asymmetric algorithm or asymmetric encryption algorithm, how many keys would be required to add the 11th employee? So currently they use symmetric with 10 employees, but if they switched over and they're using asymmetric, how many keys would that additional employee require? That's how I read that. If you're only adding 1 employee, how many keys would that 1 employee need to communicate with an asymmetric algorithm? This one's kind of a tricky question, given that it talks about symmetric to start with. But when I look at questions like this, whether it's CompTIA, ISC squared, any of the organizations, so the first sentence here doesn't matter. We're not doing anything with symmetric because the final part of the question here, it talks about asymmetric. The system should allow any 2 employees to securely communicate. So you can do that using symmetric or asymmetric. So, you know, you can take that out. So Acme Widgets is using an asymmetric encryption algorithm. How many keys would it take to add 1 more employee? How I would break that question down. So we kind of think about what we know about asymmetric encryption algorithms. you have a public key and a private key, and that's all you need per person. Our answer here is 2. Good job, guys. That was great. Yeah, correct answer is 2. I don't know why I have 1 in there. That, yeah, should just be 2. So asymmetric encryption algorithm, each employee only needs 2 keys, a public key and a private key. Great job on that question, everybody. Which of the following certificate formats is closely associated with Windows binary certificate files? Which of the following certificate formats is closely associated with Windows binary certificate files? So there were only 4. 2 of them were Windows. If you think back to it, the first 2, we had DER, we had PEM. Those 2, I don't remember Windows being part of that part of the lesson. But we can kind of bundle those together. If they were in the first 2 in the list, they both have E in the middle. So those ones were not the ones that were closely associated with Windows. But we know that PFX and P7B were both Windows. So if we're here, we've already got a 50-50 shot at getting this right. Then we have to think about it. Okay, back to the lesson. Which one was the one that was binary? Well, you have a 50-50 shot on it. I did leave them in the same order. PFX. So PFX was binary. P7B was the one that is ASCII. So however you want to remember it, the one with the number is ASCII, the one without is binary. And then DER and PEM, just remembering that both of those are not typically closely associated with Windows. They both have an E in the middle. Again, it's one of those, you just got to make flashcards for DER, binary, PEM, ASCII, PFX, Windows, binary, P7B, Windows, ASCII. There's not really a quick, dirty, easy way to remember these, unfortunately. PFX most closely associated with Windows systems that store certificates in binary format. All right, let's see how much y'all have been paying attention to asymmetric encryption. So the cyber hamburglar would like to send Jesse a message using an asymmetric encryption algorithm. What key should he use to encrypt the message? So cyber hamburglar is sending a message to Jesse. What key should he use to encrypt the message? Thinking back to asymmetric algorithms, you have your public keys and your private keys. We can take that clue from the answers. But we know that something encrypted with a public key can only be decrypted by the private key, and vice versa. So if it's encrypted with a private key, it can only be decrypted by the public key. So if I'm sending a message to Jesse, Jesse's got to be able to decrypt it. So, and I don't know his private key. I mean, you're going to want to send this over to Jesse using his public key. So you encrypt it with his public key. Only he can decrypt it with his private key. And just remember that you cannot decrypt something that is encrypted with the public key. You cannot use the public key to decrypt it. So it is, in that respect, a one-way algorithm. You have to have the private key to be able to decrypt it. Yeah, you could. So typically you won't see encryption using, and because we have one answer down here on the Hamburglar's private key, if I encrypted something with my private key, anybody could decrypt it that has my public key. So if I have shared my public key with 10 people, 10 people can see whatever I encrypt with my private key, which is primarily why you use your private key to sign your messages. So when you create that hash and then you encrypt that hash with your private key, everybody can validate that by using your public key to decrypt it. But if you're trying to protect the confidentiality of that message, you use the recipient's public key to encrypt it, because nobody can decrypt it with that public key. Only the person holding the private key can decrypt it. So it's one of these, repetition is key on these kind of questions. It can get confusing until you really start to get the repetition. It took me a little while to get used to reading these questions. So next question, which of the following servers is almost always an offline certificate authority in a large PKI deployment?
Hi folks, Johnny Boyle here.
Wait, let me go back to that question.
To see the brilliant content you're creating with my music. If you're enjoying Upbeat, why not go premium?
How do we go back?
I guarantee you won't look back.
All right, Laura, I'm gonna have to figure out how to go back here. You know what? I'll go back over it at the end of this the series of questions here. We'll take a look at that one again. So which of the following servers is always an offline CA in a large PKI deployment? This isn't one that I necessarily covered the information in depth throughout the lesson tonight. What I would look at in a question like this, where say I didn't necessarily study this particular item, I would look and go, what do I know about just the infrastructure and how things are set up in a network? So you've got your root, you've got your intermediate. I'm not 100% sure what an RA is. And then an internal certificate authority. So I've got 3 different kinds of certificate authorities. But if I'm trying to make a judgment on this about which one is probably the most important and the one that I would keep offline and unable to be accessed, which one would you choose? I'll give y'all another moment here. All right, I'm gonna pull up that question again real quick. Yeah, I made an error on that question. I selected the wrong answer on it. So yeah, the correct answer is Jesse's public key, though I completely botched the last question and I selected the wrong option. That was my bad on that one. I apologize. So the correct answer was Jesse's public key on the previous question. So y'all got that one right. I got it wrong because I wasn't paying close enough attention. Which of the following servers? So the root CA is going to be your correct answer on this one. Yeah, Laura, I apologize. That was all my bad. So your root certificate authority is going to be your base. That's going to be, I mean, if you think about it like the hierarchical structure for Linux, your root is your administrator. That's your highest power account. That's your most important account, the one that you don't want to have everybody have access to. So that's where my mind would go on a question like this. This is probably, can't guarantee you'd have a question identical to this on the exam, because they don't spend a whole lot of time covering certificate authorities as far as their implementation in an environment in this regard, but really just kind of being able to break down the terms and kind of use your best judgment on this one. So I would assume that a root CA would also be a internal CA, but it's probably going to be the highest level of your internal ones, which would also encompass your intermediate certificate authorities. So the best answer of the four would be root. So I've got a couple of these questions, and hopefully I didn't botch the answers on them again. So cyber hamburglar is sending Jesse an encrypted message using a symmetric encryption algorithm. What key should he use to encrypt the message? So is it the hamburglar's public key, hamburglar's private key, Jesse's public key, or the shared secret key? So we are using a symmetric encryption algorithm this time. Give y'all a couple more moments to get your answers in. Got 3 of 4. Give it another moment here. Okay, so got all 4 answers. So using a symmetric encryption algorithm, the key that you will use is the shared secret key. So the symmetric, we've got the same key for both parties. So it'll be used to encrypt and decrypt the message. So Bashir is using full disk encryption technology to protect contents of laptops against theft. What goal of cryptography is he attempting to achieve? So are we attempting to achieve integrity, non-repudiation, authentication, confidentiality? So using full disk encryption, protect contents of laptops. All our answers are in. Survey says confidentiality. That is the correct answer. So protecting the data from unauthorized disclosure. So being able to ensure that if one of those laptops is stolen and somebody can't log into it, they don't have valid credentials to get into it, they cannot decrypt that data, protects the confidentiality of that data. So encryption would be used for non-repudiation in a case where you are ensuring that you are in fact the sender of that data. So using it for things like digital signatures, signing an email message, and being able to verify that the message originally originated from you, and you can't deny that. So you can also use it in the case where non-repudiation can be used for actions that somebody takes. If there's any sort of logins to a server or anything like that, being able to use that particular code or whatever it may be and assign it to that particular individual, that it shows that in fact it did come from that particular PC, from that that normal login, that IP address, using all that data. You can provide non-repudiation in an investigation as well, being able to show that, you know, they can't deny that it wasn't them because everything adds up to that particular person. So when the cyber hamburglar receives the message that Jesse encrypted for him, what key should he use to decrypt the message? So Jesse encrypted the message for me, the cyber hamburglar. What key should he use? What key should I use to decrypt the message? Thank you, Revisory Orchid. I appreciate it. These kind of questions you will definitely see on the exam. Asking about asymmetric, symmetric encryption, who encrypts what, how they encrypt it. You will absolutely see these on the exam, and not just one. You'll probably see 3 to 4 of them, I would expect. So absolutely, these questions are good to drill, because you will absolutely see them. All right, I'll give it another moment for participant number 4. All right, we're gonna close the poll. Number 4 is in. Perfect. All right, so Hamburglar's private key is the correct answer here. So Jesse is going to take that message. He's going to encrypt it using the Hamburglar's public key. So the Hamburglar is the only one that can decrypt that message using his private key. Bitsdance, thanks for coming out. Appreciate you spending the time. I know we're running a little long this evening. All right, so the cyber hamburglar receives the digitally signed message from Jesse. What key should he use to verify the digital signature? So I receive a digitally signed message from Jesse. How can I verify the digital signature? So Jesse has to encrypt the digital signature, but I have to be able to decrypt it and verify that it was Jesse who sent it. But how does Jesse prove he is who he says he is in that case? The digital signatures are just proving the sender is who they say they are. So you think about it, Jesse has to take that digital signature, or in order to create that digital signature, he has to use something that only he knows, but that we can verify. And then how do we verify that? All right, 2 for 2. And we are split down the middle. So the answer here would be Jesse's public key. So in order to create a digitally signed message, Jesse will create a hash of that message, encrypt that hash using his private key that he only knows. So he's the only one that can sign that message. It's his signature, essentially. It's how he autographs that message using his private key. But anybody who reads that message can verify that he was the sender using his public key. Because if you were to use Hamburglar's public key, it won't decrypt that hash. It won't decrypt the digital signature to provide you the hash value for that message. So Jesse's public key would be the answer here to use to verify the digital signature. What type of cipher operates on one character of text at a time? This is our final question for the evening. So what type of cipher operates on one character of text at a time? A little bit of a tricky question here. A couple red herrings thrown in for you. We remember, what ciphers did we talk about? Talked about block ciphers. Didn't talk about balanced ciphers. I don't know what that is. Talked about stream ciphers. And then bit ciphers. It sounds like it'd be kind of familiar, but I don't know if we covered bit ciphers. I don't know if that was something in the material or not, but I know we did talk about a cipher that operated on one character of text or one bit of text at a time. So yes, this was a trick question. I waited a minute there. I actually figured out that I can see answers coming in, so I can see how the poll is balanced before I close it. So I wanted to kind of talk it through a little bit and kind of bring up that mindset again. Like, what do I know about this? What did I hear? Like, try and recall those instances where I've heard these terms, and try and go with what's familiar, because they will throw in stuff like balanced cipher or bit cipher on the exam just to trick you. Now, stream ciphers operate on bits, but it wasn't called a bit cipher in the book. So that's kind of how I would start to approach it, is look at what's familiar and kind of pick the things out that you know. And right off the bat, okay, I know we talked about streams, I know we talked about blocks, so all right, it's got to be one of those two. And you know, even if you had it down to the three, block, bit, and stream, you have a 1 in 3 chance of getting the answer correct when it comes time to the exam. So, but at that point, you know, okay, well, I know stream ciphers definitely worked on one character of text at a time. What about bit ciphers? I don't know if I know anything about that, but I'm going to choose the answer that I know I'm familiar with, at least recognize it, and that's going to give me the correct answer on the exam. So it's kind of playing the game with CompTIA. All right, that is everything for this evening. Always like to look at the leaderboard. We had 5 of 10, 1 of 10, 6 of 10, but there's also my one question that I botched in there that gave everybody a lower score, so can't completely go by these numbers. Not totally valid. But hey, I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. We are going to continue the drive on cryptography on Thursday. Jesse's got a little bit more to cover, so we're going to dig in a little bit deeper and continue on the journey. And anything I can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out on the Discord. Cyber Hamburglar, you can't miss me. I've got the gold name in the channel. And then on LinkedIn, you can find me. Last of the LinkedIn here is Taylor-McDonald1. Happy to connect with you, answer any questions, chat with you anytime. So feel free to reach out. Happy Monday. Hope y'all have a great week. In fact, make it a great week. Don't let it happen to you. Don't have one. Make it one. And I will see y'all next Monday.